Good morning, Red Hour. We are going to talk about your second test from Math and Focus, Chapter 2, Rational Number Operations. You all should have your test back here in a minute, and on the front I stapled this reflection sheet for you. Please make sure you take a minute to give your name, hour, and date. I'm sorry I can't be here with you today, but I trust that if you follow along, you're going to be set for all of the expectations today. One of those expectations being, let's reflect on that test. See what things are working for you and what things we can improve upon. Notice this reflection and signature from a parent is due this Friday, December 8th. So just a friendly reminder, this is an important date. You might want to mark it. Next up, I want you to skim through your test. I want you to reflect and figure out which of these things describe you best. So there are a lot of different possibilities. Maybe I don't read the questions correctly that often. That would be a common error for me, and then I'd circle number 1. Maybe instead, I'm forgetting to use word form. So number 6 is talking about word form. I need to write my answer in a complete sentence. Maybe you read through these and you say, there's nothing here that really describes me and my common errors, but you find something else that does. Then you would choose 8, where it says other, but you also have to tell me what that means to you. So explain what the other error was for you. What's that piece that you need to improve upon? Next, we have these 3 boxes in our reflection, and I'd like you to take a quick minute and see if you can answer these for yourselves and also to be shared with your parents. And again, answer honestly, because that kind of helps you figure out what you need to target for next time. When did you start studying for the test? Was it the day you got the practice test? Was it before that? Was it not at all? What did you do to what did you do to study for the test? Lots of different possibilities here, but be honest. If you didn't look at YouTube, don't write YouTube. If you used your notes, write something about your notes. If you used the practice test, you can write about that. Maybe you can think of something else in here. Maybe it has to do with a parent that helped quiz you or something along that line. Next, this 3rd box. What could you have done differently? Well, unless you are that 1 or 2 students out there with those really high A's and no errors, or just 1 or 2 errors, we all can probably target something that we might do a little bit differently, something that we want to work on or improve on. A good hint would be to look up here and see, well, which one did I kind of struggle with? Number 4, oh, I did not study this particular topic enough. I wasn't familiar with the idea of maybe range, or I wasn't flexible enough in my thinking on that test. So I could write a little note to myself, what would I do differently? So maybe I would explore some different problems that kind of involve integers or rational number operations in another way. So maybe I'd do a little exploration on my own if that was something I struggled with. Please choose something for yourself. And I think just a few bullets in here would be appropriate. If you want to write something more, you can. Underneath this line, this really talks about your score and what you plan to do with it. So will you take a quick minute, find your current score, which is on the attached test. And it's out of 25 points, so you should be able to give me a fraction here. So maybe you had 17.5 out of 25. And off to the side then I would have given you a percentage. So let me think about this. Every single problem was worth 4%. So 17 times 4 makes 28 plus 40, 68. Plus half of 4 is 2 more. This would be a 70%. And a C minus, it should say on your test if this was your score. You also could look over here and just see, well, 17.5 actually landed between D's and C's. So I also know it's going to be a C minus of some sort. You can't really fill out this piece yet. My improvement points. That's something that I will record for you after our quiz on hopefully Friday. So we're planning on Friday as long as we have core. Remember, that's that funny half day, so we have to see how things go. If it's not Friday, expect it to be Monday when I see you again. Next, please choose which one best describes you. Are you going to keep your current score? Are you happy with that A or B? Maybe you're even happy with a C, depending. Okay, but anything below a C we definitely say is not passing, and you also need to be aware in the past accelerated students weren't allowed to stay in this classroom if they didn't have a B minus or better. Had to be an A or B. So I really want you thinking strongly about this. Keep that score if it's an A or B, maybe a C depending on the student, but the rest of us want to look at this next option. I choose to improve my score with the optional improvement points quiz. Remember, this quiz is optional. You don't have to change your score. If you don't want to put the work into it, probably won't change much anyway. But if you're willing to put a little bit of effort into review and studying, well, you can probably gain a few points back. For every point you gain, I'll gain a half point into your total score. So it is worth it. We can probably bump a few students from a letter grade to the next. The next thing I want you to take a look at here is the parent signature. This one's important for me. It tells me that you're communicating with your parents about how things went. And yeah, I sent out emails, so chances are good. Maybe some of your parents already know that it was awesome, or oh my gosh, we have some work to do. Those of you in the middle, this is kind of important for you too, because maybe you didn't get the email and your parents need to know where you are at this point. Everybody, A's, B's, C's, or Z's, you're required to have a parent signature for me when this is due on Friday. Now I want you to take a quick minute, flip through that test for me, and figure out which problems you need to review and study. So if you were to go to this test real quickly, I will go through the answer key with you in just a second. But if you notice there's a star next to the problem, it means it's right. You didn't lose any points. But if I wrote just a +half here, it means you're missing something. You also could figure out how many points each problem was worth by looking at these little keys. Meaning it says, question numbers 1 through 4, well, that's 4 different questions, and they're each 1-pointers. Those were the basic skills of this test. Well, more complex problems came next, and we know that with that number 6. But anyway, numbers 5 to 7, there are 3 different problems. They're each worth 2 points. So then you would look at numbers 5 through 6 and see how you did. Sorry, 5 through 7, and see how you did. If there's a star, there's nothing to change or improve. If there's a plus something, it means you missed some portion of that problem. Maybe you missed a half a point, maybe it was more than that. Just depends on how many errors I found in your work. And I really did dig. To be very honest with you, this took me quite a while because I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. So do take a quick minute and kind of flip through. See what problems you have a little plus something next to instead of a star, because those are the problems that you'll want to focus in on. Whether you take the retake or the improvement points quiz or not, those are pieces that could show up again, and we don't want to trip you up. Remember, I want that Chapter 2 test attached, and I want it returned with a completed parent signature. So that again is due Friday. Let's take a quick look through the key. I'm sure I'm going to flash this too quickly for you to follow my steps, but at least take a quick minute to get out a pen and maybe write down good answers next to the problem number. Problem number 1 should be 26. Problem number 2 should be a negative 286. Problem number 3 should be in fraction form, 5/14. Problem number 4, well, these signs disagreed. It's a negative 495. I showed you a couple options on number 5. I told you that I was going to change this mixed number into first an equivalent fraction and then into a decimal. And then I completed my work over here. Number 5, you should get an answer of negative 75 and 34/100ths, or that's negative 75 and 17/50ths as a mixed number. Either decimal or fraction form is fine for this one because they gave us both to start with. Number 6, the nightmare. If you take a look, lots of you said, hey, take that one fraction, turn it into a decimal. M over n, or m divided by n, or numerator divided by denominator. But when you do that, when will this thing end? I have no idea, and I decided to stop at a certain point. I know some of you found the point where it starts to repeat, but it's not super helpful to plug into your problem that way. So I wanted to have another plan of attack. Over here, if you take a look, I decided to turn everything into fractions or mixed numbers instead. And then I worked it out line by line. You should get to a final answer of negative 128 and 48/100ths, or negative 128 and 12/25ths. Either one is acceptable because we started with both decimals and fractions, so either one can happen in an answer. I do want to just show you a quick thought off to the side. Some of us found this in the test, and it was really exciting to see. Some of us just took this portion of the test when we were ready. Oops, let's see if I can highlight it here. This 3/7, and we said, well, I could just try to multiply this negative 42/100ths in fraction form instead. So you wrote a negative 42/100ths. If you look at the setup, something beautiful happens. This cross-simplifying here will actually wipe out the 7 in the denominator. You can divide both the top and the bottom by 7 here. 7 goes into 7 one time, and 7 goes into negative 42 negative 6 times. And in a minute, you'll get negative 18 over 100, which really means negative 18 over 100. That really could be written in decimal form. Just remember your negative. Looks like I almost forgot mine. Okay, so again, this isn't an answer, but it's a great way to maybe resolve this issue with this looks like a repeating or maybe a irrational fraction. So either case, it probably would be best to turn everything into fraction form or mixed number form. Or if you notice this step, when it's time to multiply, it actually wipes out your denominator, which is pretty handy. The last one we need to talk about is number 7. It should be positive. Notice there's agreement. They both hate Brussels sprouts. They should love them. They're good for you. Why don't we go ahead and turn the page and let's just see if you've got good answers. If not, take a quick minute, not to change your test because that's not worth anything. It won't be turned back in again to me besides for filing in your evidence folders or your data folders. It's just important to take this number, maybe copy it down next to the problem because then it gives you a tool to study. So we're looking for a negative 270 and 4/10 degrees Fahrenheit for number 8. Remember, we had to take the maximum, take away the range to get there. And we took away more than we had, so it ends up being negative. For number 9, we'll find 1,010 feet. And if you gave me word form, that would be awesome. Some of us like to use a lot of words, but we forget to label. What are we measuring in? So you want to say feet. Make sure that feet are included in that nice sentence. If we take a look at number 10, we had to do a conversion, and I really told you that you could take 6 1/2 times 1,000. So one way of doing that would be maybe to write 6.5 times 1,000, and then you'd watch that decimal jump 3 times. Again, this is kind of how you had to start. The next thing you would do is divide by 500. Notice I realized that when I have these stacked together, if I was thinking of it in fraction form, I can see that 6,500 over 500 really would help me divide both by 10. I could simplify that fraction, and I'd still get the great answer of 13 jugs it requires to fill that bucket. Let's see here. We are ready for number 11. We didn't like this one a whole lot. We don't know how much was in that account to start, and it doesn't really matter. The question is, how much does the bank account change? So it doesn't ask for a final balance because you couldn't give one if you wanted to. We don't know if they started with a positive or a negative. What we do know is it changed in a positive way. They gained $82.38 during this process of gaining deposits or paychecks and paying with their bills, okay, those negatives. So if you notice, I combined my negatives, my bills, and I combined my positives, my paychecks, and then I used different signs subtract to get to a final answer. Number 12, there are 2 parts here, and we didn't like this one either because that word stock and share kind of threw us, but we won't worry about it. You'd almost treat it like an account. So if you start with $38 in your account, and we notice there are days of losses and days of gains, how would it end? Well, before we can say that, they asked us to find the total change. Was it a positive or a negative? Well, there were more losses than gains, so there's a negative $3.60 that's going to happen or change your account or your stock or your share. And that's okay. We just go ahead and put that in word form. And again, notice I use the word drop, so that replaces the need for a negative. Part B then says, well, how much is that share worth? What that means is how much is the account worth? It means I start with the original account and I show you whether it was an increase or a decrease. Oh, it was an overall decrease. So I'm going to add a negative or show maybe a subtraction, which requires me to add the opposite. We'll get the same great answer. I know that the dollar amount drops, so I use different signs subtract, and you'll get $34.40. Number 13 has 2 parts, and actually part 1 has 3 pieces. So right here you were supposed to first find me the range, the liquid ranges of each of these elements, and we didn't like those negatives there a whole lot, so I'll be honest, I used absolute value to deal with mine. When I talk about distance, I really am thinking of a positive distance every time. I'm also thinking to myself, well, I'm finding the difference between them, the distance between them. So it is a subtraction operation when they're on the same side of 0. On my number line, 2 numbers that are both on the negative side of 0 get subtracted. Well, neon here has a positive 4 and 52/100 degrees Fahrenheit. If you told me a negative, I didn't freak out about that. But again, we're thinking about a distance, so it's going to be positive. Nitrogen, it should be at 25 and 56/100 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, if you're using this absolute value, this distance idea, it's going to be a positive result. Helium, we would say that their difference is 6 and 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, again using absolute value. The final answer is part B. Notice it says which element has the smallest liquid range. There were 2 pieces here. Neon ends up having the smallest range. It has the smallest value here of all 3. I know we found this test extremely challenging, so for that reason, we're going to kind of pause our video here. I'm going to give you a chance to finish your reflection. We can't really ask questions of probably our guest teacher unless they really love this rational number operation stuff. But maybe you could talk with each other about some things that you struggled on. Just have some conversation about how you showed your work or what you might change or what kind of things you're wondering about. You can always jot a question down that you can ask me when I come back. Let's stop here with our Chapter 2 reflection. Again, this should be stapled to your test. You should be taking it home and returning it to me signed by Friday when you're expecting to take a rational number operations quiz to get some extra points back, some improvement points.